Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a set of sources that essentially act as an architectural blueprint.
Yeah, but definitely not for a building.
Right, exactly. We are looking at a blueprint for the entire timeline of human history. Which, if you ever felt like the world is just a chaotic wheel spinning completely out of control, well, the materials we are digging into today offer a wildly different perspective.
They really do. It is a breathtaking scope when you step back and look at it.
Our mission today is to trace this biblical timeline, stretching all the way from the current moment you and I are living in right now, straight into eternity.
And to truly understand this blueprint, we have to look directly at the foundation. So today, we are keeping our conversation anchored strictly to the text itself.
We want to do this justice.
Exactly. History, according to these sources, isn't just some random sequence of events. It is moving very deliberately. It has a trajectory, and it is purposefully heading toward God's future kingdom.
And since we aren't just going to summarize these ideas from a 30,000-foot view, we are going to actually look at the specific scriptures that construct this timeline.
We'll cite the references clearly as we go.
Right, so you can follow along and see the actual building blocks of this map. Okay, let's unpack this. The absolute foundational framework of this entire timeline, the way Jesus and the apostles repeatedly divided God's rescue plan for humanity, is by splitting it into two very distinct periods.
They called them this age and the age to come.
Yeah.
And that division is basically the skeleton key that unlocks the whole blueprint. You simply cannot understand the timeline without realizing that these two ages are defined by entirely different characteristics.
They operate under fundamentally opposed realities. You actually see this hard line drawn in the sand right in the Gospel of Matthew. In chapter 12, verse 32, Jesus makes this fascinating comment about forgiveness.
Right.
He says it won't happen either in this age or in the age to come.
And later, the Apostle Paul uses the exact same framework in his letter to the Ephesians. In chapter 1, verse 21, he describes Christ as being seated far above all rule and authority, not only in this age, but also in the one to come.
So let's locate ourselves on that map right now.
Good idea.
If you are looking at this massive blueprint, there is a giant glowing red marker that says you are here squarely in the middle of this present age.
And the realities of this current age are sobering. Our sources describe it as a world system that is currently dominated by sin, death, and rebellion.
It is the world we wake up to every single day. The morning news cycle, the illness, the constant friction of life.
Precisely. The spiritual climate is intense. Paul writes about this heavily. In Galatians chapter 1, verse 4, he writes about Christ, who gave himself for our sins to deliver us from the present evil age.
Deliver us from it.
Yes. And in Ephesians 2, verse 2, he speaks of this era as following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air. It is an age where Satan is highly active, and consequently, where God's people frequently face pushback and persecution.
But it's also a time of just ordinary, everyday human existence, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It is a complex mixture of the righteous and the wicked, living side by side, going to the grocery store, raising kids. Jesus touches on this in Luke 20, verse 34, when he says, "The sons of this age marry and are given in marriage."
So ordinary family life, commerce, and society continue, even while this underlying spiritual reality plays out.
But this age comes with an expiration date.
It is entirely temporary. It is designed to end.
Which brings us to the ultimate destination on the far right side of our blueprint, the age to come.
This corresponds exclusively to the eternal state, the new heavens and the new earth.
The conditions of these two ages are literally like night and day.
The contrast is stunning. You go from a world defined by decay to a world defined by permanence.
Just listen to the physical realities described in the text. Revelation 21, verse 4 says, "He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away."
And then the very next chapter, Revelation 22, verse 3, adds, "No longer will there be anything accursed."
No death, no curse. A perfectly restored reality.
Exactly. Where the adversary is permanently removed, yielding full, unhindered fellowship with God. And for humanity, it means an entirely new kind of physical existence.
Right, picking up where I left off in Luke.
Yes, in Luke chapter 20, verses 35 and 36, Jesus explains this shift. He says, "But those who are considered worthy to attain to that age and to the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage, for they cannot die anymore, because they are equal to angels and are sons of God, being sons of the resurrection.
It is a completely different operating system for human biology. Resurrection life.
They cannot die anymore.
That is a massive paradigm shift, but that naturally raises a huge logistical question.
How do we get there?
Right. If we are stuck in the mud of this age right now, how do we cross the chasm to get to the age to come? What is the actual transition point on the timeline?
The text is quite direct about what pulls the plug on our current era. In Matthew 13, verse 39, Jesus is explaining a parable and he plainly declares the harvest is the end of the age.
That concept of the harvest represents a massive, unmistakable divine intervention.
It does. This present age doesn't just slowly fade out. It ends when Christ physically returns to earth to set things right for the people who followed him and to judge the wicked.
Revelation 19 describes this incredible sky-splitting moment.
But what is so striking in these sources is the geographical specificity. It's not some abstract mystical metaphor.
No, it is extremely literal. You could drop a pin on a modern map.
You really could. The prophet Zechariah foresaw the exact location of this return. In Zechariah 14, verse 4, it says, "On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west by a very wide valley."
He physically returns to a real mountain in the Middle East to intervene in human history.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because if you are just casually reading through the text, you might think the timeline is simple.
Jesus returns, the present age ends, and boom.
Exactly. Boom. We are immediately dropped into the eternal state. The new heavens and new earth begin right there on that Tuesday. But looking closely at the blueprint, there's a massive surprise waiting in the sequence of events.
It is a completely unexpected phase that catches a lot of people off guard when they first study this.
Yes. Revelation chapter 20 reveals a 1,000-year transitional phase called the millennium.
It is a literal 1,000-year reign that sits right between Christ's return and the final permanent eternal state.
The bridge.
What's fascinating here is the absolute necessity of this bridge. You might wonder why God doesn't just instantly snap his fingers and skip straight to eternity. But this 1,000-year period serves a profound theological and historical purpose.
It's like a massive home renovation.
That's a great way to put it. It's like God is flipping the house of the earth. The millennium is that weird transitional phase where the stunning new appliances are installed, the house looks incredible, but you're still walking around the contractor's tools in the hallway.
It's not the final, perfectly polished product yet.
Right. It's a bridge between a deeply corrupted world and a perfectly holy eternity. During this time, the dynamics of the earth shift dramatically. Satan is bound, completely prevented from deceiving the nations.
And Christ is physically reigning over the earth.
And resurrected saints are reigning alongside him.
Let's paint a picture of what life in this millennial kingdom actually looks like, because the sources give us some incredible, vivid details.
Global shifts.
Yes, it is characterized by two major global shifts: global peace and global worship. It is a world where the concept of war literally disappears from human society. In Isaiah 2, verse 4, it says, "He shall judge between the nations and shall decide disputes for many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore."
Imagine the economic implications of that alone. An entire planet where trillion-dollar military budgets are completely repurposed for agriculture and human flourishing.
And along with that unprecedented peace comes a unified global worship. Zechariah 14, verse 16 paints this picture. "Then everyone who survives of all the nations that have come against Jerusalem shall go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Booths."
Which, if you remember your ancient history, the Feast of Booths was the Jewish festival celebrating God's provision in the wilderness.
It's fascinating that this ancient historical festival makes a comeback on a massive global scale in the future.
It really grounds the future in the history of the text. But as beautiful as this golden age is, we have to highlight the lingering contractor tools in the hallway, to use our earlier analogy.
The imperfect parts.
Exactly. The earth is restored, and human lifespans are dramatically extended, almost hearkening back to the ancient days before the flood. But the curse of sin has not been fully eradicated yet. Death has not been permanently destroyed.
This is one of the most shocking details in the whole blueprint. You have this verse in the text that completely shatters our normal expectations of what this future kingdom is like.
It does. It forces you to rethink the entire era. In Isaiah 65, verse 20, describing this future era, it says, "No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days, for the young man shall die 100 years old, and the sinner 100 years old shall be accursed."
Wait, hold on. Let's make sure we are hearing that right. Someone dying at 100 years old will be considered a tragic premature death.
Like a teenager dying today. Exactly. Life is so prolonged and the environment is so abundant that hitting a century mark is considered just the beginning of your prime. But the inescapable fact remains, people are still dying.
And that alone proves we are still in a transitional phase.
We have not yet reached the eternal state of Revelation 21, where death is thrown out entirely.
Okay, but this raises a huge logistical question in my mind. If there's no death for the resurrected saints we talked about earlier, but there are still mortals who are dying at 100 years old, are they just living side by side?
They are.
How does a society with both immortals and mortals even function? The blueprint actually outlines 3 distinct populations coexisting during this time, doesn't it?
It does, and it's a wild dynamic to imagine. First, you have the resurrected saints. This includes the church, Old Testament believers, and martyrs. Revelation 20, verse 4, specifically describes them possessing glorified, immortal bodies and actively reigning with Christ.
They've already attained that resurrection life. They cannot die.
Right. You can imagine them functioning as perfect, incorruptible leaders and administrators across the globe.
But then you have the second group, the tribulation survivors.
These are believers who are still alive in their physical bodies when Christ returns. And unlike the resurrected saints, they enter this millennial kingdom in their natural mortal bodies.
Jesus talks about this separation of the surviving nations in Matthew 25, verses 31 through 34, welcoming the righteous mortals into the kingdom.
And because they are in mortal bodies, that leads directly to the third population, their descendants.
Those mortal survivors will continue to marry, they will have children, and they will massively populate the nations over the course of those 1,000 years.
So you have a global society where glorified immortals are interacting daily with mortal humans who are still marrying, reproducing, and eventually dying.
It's incredible to imagine a local city council meeting in that era. Now, as we zoom out and look at this timeline, there is a specific phrase that keeps popping up in the source material, and we hear it in popular culture all the time: the day of the Lord.
Yes.
When we hear day, we naturally think of a 24-hour period, a Tuesday, a Thursday. But the blueprint redefines this entirely. It is not a single calendar day. It is an extended, overarching period of God's direct, unmistakable intervention in human history.
It is a critical shift in perspective. To understand the day of the Lord, you have to see how it spans the entirety of Scripture like a massive canopy.
How so?
Well, the Old Testament usage is very heavy.
Yeah.
The focus there is almost exclusively on judgment on Israel and judgment on the surrounding nations. If you look at Isaiah 13 or Joel chapters 1 through 3, the features of this day are terrifying.
Cosmic disturbances.
War, wrath, and deep darkness. It is God stepping out of the shadows into the spotlight of history to deal with rebellion.
But then you turn to the New Testament, and the lens zooms out even further, showing us the full scope of this event. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 2, Paul writes, "For you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night."
So begin suddenly catching the world off guard.
But then, look at how far into the future it extends. In 2 Peter 3, verse 10, it says, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and the works that are done on it will be exposed."
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you can see why it absolutely cannot be a 24-hour day. The day of the Lord acts like a giant umbrella spanning multiple monumental events across the timeline.
It covers a lot of ground.
It really does.
Yeah.
It begins with the sudden rapture, the sudden gathering of believers. Then it covers the tribulation, which is a concentrated period of divine judgment and trial poured out on the earth, like we see in Joel 2 and the early chapters of Revelation.
So that is the sudden thief in the night beginning of the day.
Yes. But that umbrella continues to stretch out over time. It covers Christ's physical return to earth in Revelation 19.
It stretches over that entire 1,000-year millennial kingdom from Zechariah 14 we just discussed.
And then it finally concludes with the ultimate climax. The great white throne judgment described in Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15.
The final courtroom.
That is the ultimate final courtroom where the last judgments are handed down, ending with the total destruction of the present heavens and earth to make way for the new creation. All of those massive, epoch-shifting events fall under the single banner of the day of the Lord.
So what does this all mean for the physical planet we are standing on right now? We've talked a lot about human populations, divine judgments, and spiritual realities, but the blueprint gives equal weight to the dirt and rocks of the earth itself.
The physical creation isn't just a disposable stage for human history to play out on. It is deeply tied to our redemption.
In Romans chapter 8, verse 22, it says, "For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now."
Pains of childbirth is such a vivid, intentional metaphor. It implies intense agony. Yes, we see that in natural disasters, entropy, the whole system breaking down.
But it's a specific kind of agony.
It's an agony that is leading to a new birth, a delivery. It isn't a death rattle of a dying planet. It is the pain of an impending, glorious transformation.
I love that. It's the tension of the delivery room, not the despair of the hospital hospice wing.
We can actually trace this reversal of the curse on the physical earth through three distinct stages on our timeline. Stage one is where we are right now, the fallen earth.
The curse is in full effect. We see death, decay, and thermodynamic corruption baked into the very physics of the universe.
Stage two is that transitional millennium we just discussed, the restored old earth.
Exactly. During the millennium, the curse is greatly reduced, though not entirely gone.
We see unprecedented agricultural abundance, global peace, and even harmony in the animal kingdom, as Isaiah 65 describes the wolf and the lamb grazing together. The earth finally gets 1,000-year Sabbath rest from its groaning.
But the final stage, stage 3, is the eternal state, the new earth.
This is where the curse is fully, completely removed. No more decay, no more entropy, total perfection. And Paul captures the climax of this planetary redemption brilliantly in Romans 8, verse 21.
He says that the creation is waiting with eager longing because the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God.
Freedom of the glory.
The physical universe itself will finally be set free from the slavery of decay. It is a stunning visual to end our timeline on. So let's pull all the way back and look at the whole blueprint we've unrolled on the table today.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We started at the "You Are Here" marker in this age, a world of daily struggle and groaning. We traced the future path to Christ's sudden return to the Mount of Olives, ending this era.
We walked across that fascinating 1,000-year bridge of the millennial kingdom, where the earth is restored and immortal saints rule alongside mortal humans.
We saw the vast umbrella of the day of the Lord bringing final judgment. And finally, we arrived at the age to come, the new heavens and new earth, where the curse is broken and death is banished forever.
By anchoring ourselves directly in the text today, we can clearly see that history is not a random accident.
It is a highly cohesive, purposeful march toward an eternal kingdom.
It really is the master blueprint. And as we wrap up this deep dive, it leaves us with something fascinating to consider.
We've spent all this time talking about the logistics of how we get to the eternal state. But here is something we didn't touch on today for you to mull over. What will we actually be doing for all of eternity?
That is a big question.
If the curse is completely gone, and we have physical, resurrected bodies on a new physical Earth, does human innovation, art, architecture, and even space exploration finally reach its peak when we have infinite time and absolutely no decay to hold us back? What does human potential look like when the brakes are permanently taken off?
That completely reframes how we think about forever. It's not floating on a cloud. It's dynamic, endless exploration and creativity without the shadow of death.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Master Blueprint. We appreciate you sitting at the table and exploring these texts with us. Keep seeking, keep reading those texts, and keep learning. We'll see you next time.